Hi, I'm Dan, another volunteer with Unicorn Riot. We have a big story to bring you all. We basically found a couple documents. One of them was sent to us by a friend who knew that we ought to take a look at it. And these documents really show the kind of inner police and military structure that'll be used at the 2016 Republican National Convention in Cleveland, Ohio. This is a topic that a lot of us in our group have followed for many years. So, 6 years ago, I found similar documents that showed how the U.S. Northern Command, NORTHCOM, prepares for what they call civil disturbance operations or riot control. And I found documents that sort of showed the trigger conditions for activating the federal military to control the U.S. population, which is something that, we hear about in terms of rumors and kind of urban legends and whatnot going around the internet. But what we have here now is kind of the latest version of this type of information. We can show you how the entire command structure in Cleveland is set up to control the general population during the RNC. And then also, due to the document that our friend found and sent over to us, we can also show you how the military is set up. We have found basically where the secret bases are that they don't usually like to have publicized. We found out about training courses that FEMA provides them to do mass arrests and other kinds of things like that using mobile field forces and stuff. So we really have a pretty comprehensive view, much more than we did before, about how they will set this up. The structure is consistent with previous years, and we will try to kind of illustrate where the existing system of RNC style national special security events comes from, but also they have some new innovations kind of in the works. So basically, this is the most kind of severe political crackdown kind of environment that you get in the domestic United States. This is something that'll really affect how the entire next 4 years essentially develop politically in the United States. So it is really important to understand that like these are the things at the heart of the system that are being done to control the population, to use the Pentagon domestically for very unusual purposes that aren't just simply having the National Guard directing traffic and stuff like that. It's a lot more complicated. A lot of different agencies get activated, and so we found just a huge amount of structural information about how this all works. So what I'm going to do now is I will run through kind of a screen cap or screencast of first the city's presentation of what they're planning to do, and then the military presentation of how they will work as units in the military to kind of create forward staging bases. When we put those things together, we have a much more concrete picture of what we're looking at. So come along with me. This is going to be kind of a lot of acronyms and information, but I think you will leave this with a much better understanding of what is going on in this situation. So this is the City of Cleveland's preparedness update for the RNC. This PDF file randomly showed up on Document Cloud. It's indexed. You can find it on Google right now. And the metadata says that the title and author is Gene Cofield, and it's from PowerPoint on May 31st, 2016. Seems like it's probably legit. Opening comments. Different sections of the city, just the city's structure. So this is the hard zone. That area hasn't been released yet, but that's kind of like the inner perimeter. They control everything inside there. The highway patrol handles the governors, and those are the supervisors. So Ron Rowe, RNC coordinator for the United States Secret Service, is in charge of the NSSE's overall planning. And then so you can see that there's all these different teams that are involved. Stuff like airspace, counter surveillance, I teams is over here, stuff like that. Division of Police with law enforcement have their plans, and blah 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 will support your constitutional rights and that kind of thing. Unified command structure is actually code that has to do with this concept called the ICS, which is a way of managing these huge events, incident command system. So there'd be 500 local law enforcement and about 2,500 kind of outside law enforcement. And also, this really gets right to the point that they're using the National Incident Management System, which was basically made available around 2008. And then everybody gets plugged into this system, and then they can all work in concert. This is the standard platform everybody's supposed to adhere to. So we can look a little more into that later. You'll see it's pretty important. So NIMS uses the incident command system. It's a way of managing events that is somewhat similar to that of a natural disaster, but there's some more twists involved. The FBI is involved, FEMA is involved. Nothing too dramatic yet. This shows that there's 4 different types of kind of roving teams that'll be out and about: counter surveillance teams, protective intelligence teams, and intelligence teams, and street undercover teams. There's also a Northern Border Initiative which involves the coastal area of the lake there, and then airspace will be restricted. This also means that any aircraft that you're going to see could very well be surveillance aircraft, which is something that we cover in more detail in our post. And all of these pages are, numbered. This is page 11 in the PDF and in the corner, so the numbers are match on this file. Page 12, nothing too interesting. Page 13, a special video unit has been created to collect all the video evidence. So there's a video team. And then this has to do with the mass arrest system. They're talking about the capacity of the Department of Corrections facilities, House of Corrections, Annex Building, Central Prison Unit, District Jail facilities. 15, Cuyahoga County Jail, additional beds. Geauga County Jail, some medical coverage. And then they will work with the court system. And they also have court space. They participated in several tabletop exercises pertaining to mass arrests. And of course, we will have the appropriate capacity in the event of mass arrests. So that's charming. So tabletop exercise is called TTX. You'll see that elsewhere in the files. This is some emergency service stuff. I'm just going to kind of skip through. It's, it just means they have paramedics and so forth in case things happen, etc., etc. So not the most exciting area. So there's also veterinary support. There's a team for the police horses and dogs. So that's a thing. The interesting thing about the fire stuff, there's something called an all hazards management center. So the fire, patrol will be set up around the facilities. The extrication teams are interesting in extracting individuals from restraint device designed to cause civil unrest and disruption. So field force extrication teams. So that would basically mean the element of like the fire department that would cut people loose from sleeping dragons. Technical rescue teams, yeah. Okay. So 31 communications system. They learned from the previous RNC DNC. They will be using multiple systems. And then one thing that's interesting here is the Government Emergency Telecommunications Service, GETS, has it's something that's popped up a lot of times, that and the programs that it's related to during national crises. Since high-level events, this type of technology comes into play. All right. So this is where we're getting interesting now, finally. The Emergency Operations Center, page 33, key central location managed by the city. It talks to the other nodes: the Multi-Agency Coordinating Center, the Joint Operations Center, the Critical Infrastructure Coordinating Center, the Intelligence Operations Center of the FBI, the Cuyahoga County EOC, the State of Ohio EOC, and all the other command centers and posts. So we have mapped out by Unicorn Riot where a lot of those facilities are based on this info. Using the area command model of the incident command system, if you want to look that up. The EOC will have 2 shifts at 600 to 1800 and 1800 to 600. Also, this is important, the Joint Information Center is located at the EOC. So public information collection dissemination. So this is where all the corporate media will hang out to get their propaganda. They probably won't let anybody outside the bubble of their information warfare into that room, So the journalists who work for Fox News and stuff will just kind of repeat whatever they're told from inside the JIC at the EOC. That's kind of a common way that RNCs, DNCs are managed in terms of information warfare. So page 35, incident action plans and situation reports about everything regularly produced. So they have 100 cameras around the city that are going to be fed into this, as well as other agencies, and a video wall for informed decisions, and knowledge center software, which will track the incident command system stuff. You can look at knowledge-center.com and look at their software. I'm sure it's basically that. So it also shows there's 3 rooms at EOC: main floor, tactics room, JIC. So 1/3 of it is just for propaganda. There you go. Kind of a typical array of parties present. You can see FEMA, FBI, Utility Knowledge Center. So this one's a little more interesting. This is the A shift org chart. Again, that someone released this. So if there's going to be like lawsuits from the ACLU and stuff, they're going to need to have the information of these people's names. So if we zoom in a little, we can really kind of see that who's running the unified command, who's the legal section, who are the liaisons, and all of that. And then if we go down, there's kind of blue division, gold division, sorry, purple division, white, internal, corrections, intel, marine, all of that stuff. So, and then the other stuff, other section people are named. So, oh yeah, there you go. Lodging unit, Cleveland State, Case Western, and Notre Dame. Well, there you have it. It's all right there. So that is the org chart for the A shift. So page 39. FEMA provides multi-day riot control training, including via the Center for Domestic Preparedness. If you go to their website, you can look it up and see what kind of stuff they got going on. And then these are like the names of the classes, and they are on Google. So FEMA Crowd Management, 3 days. Emergency Management Institute, also part of FEMA. So they're teaching people very high level how to use the National Incident Management System and the Incident Command System, and then constitutional policing, and then such First Amendment. Yeah, really. So that is kind of the overview of this training process. So supposedly they're teaching people about the constitutional rights. Again, this is training the police in preparation for this. So you have FEMA, different programs FEMA trains them in. Field force operations, pretty detailed. You can look at the website for that. And that involves, mass arresting people, mobile police, etc. CBRNE is chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, explosive. That's sort of like hazardous material training. So whenever you see that, they're kind of anticipating if something like a dirty bomb goes off or chemical weapons or whatever. That's what that's about. The Division of Police executive staff got a FEMA-sponsored training and handed 3-day tabletop exercise how to mitigate a concentrated coordinated attack. So again, this is all National Incident Management Framework. Emergency Management Institute is this under section of FEMA. And so Ohio also trained people in that incident command system stuff. A lot of people on other slides you'll see got this sort of training, the upper level MGT 300 Field Force Command and Planning or Field Force Command Executive Command. And you can see that the captains of the field operations have been certified in FEMA CDP MGT 300 Field Force Command and Planning. So again, this really shows how FEMA is really, doing a lot of very sophisticated work to spread the doctrines of riot control to local police forces, and this is where they're doing it. Medical service stuff, pretty similar. They are teaching some of the medical people field force operations, National Incident Management System, more medical training, again, kind of hazardous incidents, and then captains of field operations, emergency medical service, got that field force training. So they talk about the medical people getting the same kind of FEMA 3-day training, more incident command system introductions, and then teaching. I think that this would be FEMA civil disturbance procedures, probably. I think CD means civil disturbance, most likely. So field force command and planning, and then again, executive command for the medical people. These are their qualifications. Fire training. Incident responses, more field force stuff. Okay, extrication tactics, FFE, PER 202. That's probably like the disable sleeping dragon type, PVC pipe stuff, I'm assuming. Pretty safe assumption based on what we saw earlier. So, other training, this is probably interesting. There's a lot of pork in these grants, so they're going to try to train people to not go in with the grant corruption, I guess, kickbacks. Intermodal and rail training. This is very interesting. Anarchist tactics during large events. Cleveland Clinic Mercyhurst University Research Team. So this is a pretty good example of how you can kind of, weaponize academia. I couldn't find anything else online about this. It shows, again, sort of to saying, oh, anarchists are the problem. Academia, help the police control them. That Is that what people signed on for? That's what kind of happens from these events, that type of redirection of priority. Then last slide, finally, goal of Cleveland, etc. So they got a bunch of stuff from the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Affairs. Take a look at their website sometime. You'll be kind of shocked at all the sort of pork they hand out. So they always get all this gear so that they can kind of treat the population with even more impunity after the event is over. So they got all this sort of riot control gear at the last second that doesn't work that well. They have now pickup trucks, cargo vans, transport vans, hazmat. These are utility vehicles, which are a little bigger than all-terrain vehicles. They got bicycles, chemical munitions, more chemicals. Again, those will be left over from the event. They'll be used on the population later. Housing at local universities for out-of-state law enforcement officers. So those universities will then be paid to rent out the space. And so we saw on the other chart which universities they're staying at, which is very convenient. Memoranda of understanding with external law enforcement entities. MOUs, oftentimes held as secret, kind of define the interfaces between law enforcement when they're cooperating. And in this case, since they're saying it was purchased, there's probably a lot of cash involved to pay everybody to show up to police this thing, a bonanza of new gear for them and overtime. So, and ambulances. So that's the end of the city slides. Thank you for sticking through that. Now we'll go into the military slides. And again, the stuff will be used later to continue to abuse the population in Cleveland, which has been happening a ton, especially in recent years. All right, so there's 17 slides here. This is the DCO, Defense Coordinating Officer, document from the Ohio Emergency Management Spring Conference, 26th of April 2016, by Colonel Frederick A. Drummond, a DCO from Region 5 of the United States, which is the FEMA region. There was no metadata on this file, but yeah, so it's 17 pages. Stick with me. It's pretty interesting. So basically, what this kind of shows us is that military teams that work under the U.S. Northern Command are attached to each FEMA region, and they handle what's called defense support of civil authorities, using federal authority and resources to support their whoever's kind of called them up. So, U.S. Army North is a unit underneath U.S. Northern Command, which is so Army North is located in Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and NORTHCOM is the command created in 2002 as the military's counterpart to Homeland Security. So it does Homeland Defense, civil support, and security cooperation to defend the United States. You might have seen NORTHCOM pop up I'm sure as part of a PR thing, they were inserted into a recent Superman movie as like heroes. So yeah, NORTHCOM is a very large command, and they get very involved with national special security events, as which we learned from 2008. So, um, the way that it works is that there are teams of defense coordinating officers that are sent out to each FEMA region office. Chicago, the Frank Drummond, the man who gave this presentation, works at the FEMA office, which is on Clark Street, 7th floor in Chicago. So that's these are the teams, and so then they have other components that they hook up to protect the American people and our way of life. So the emergency support functions are the kinds of things that they do. In theory, this is the good that's being produced, whether it's, I don't know, firefighting or other things like that. Also, it's interesting they mention the National Communications System here, which again is part of this fallback thing that Kennedy created in 1963, and that's on here. Okay, so they have a lot of partners. We got all the British royal institutions, Mexico, etc., International Red Cross, and then a lot of agencies, the CDC, Geographical Survey, Homeland Security. FEMA is obviously right there at the top. NASA, you'll see that coming up more. And then obviously all these different military agencies also they use the CDOs as teams to plug in when these things happen, and then they can activate from any given agency under certain legal authorities, which you'll see later. But it's sort of a tie-in to a lot of different people. So this is a little technical, but the Title 10 functions are certain authorities to control and intervene inside the United States. They are combined. So that is sort of a very high level overview. So defense support of civil authorities includes Joint Task Force North working with law enforcement, and that is a drug task force type of thing. So that's something this is sort of where the statutory military drug stuff starts popping up. So RNC, DNC, presidential summits, those are also DSCA. And then they're saying there aren't a ton of use of other types of government actors, but that's not totally true. But then if they were going to escalate, if there's like a huge earthquake, New Madrid, that was something that when I found the files 6 years ago, it was about New Madrid and DSCA in that situation. You can read up more on that there. This is just the structure of the units. They say they're SME, subject matter experts. They talk to everybody. And then this is the unit, and then they have cool little satellite trucks. This shows all the names of all the people that are involved in the Region 5, which is based out of Chicago, that'll be running the stuff as kind of the forward team. Drummond, these are his people underneath him. And then these are EPLO officers at the state level. So these are the people for Ohio. And again, it's good to we have to understand who's involved because if lawsuits have to be filed that name people in the government, you have to know what these names are. It doesn't do anybody any good if they're not known in this public role. This is an example of how when they set up a command, they do something called a dual status commander here in the middle. The National Guard is kind of a twofold thing, and the military can be a twofold thing because the governors can have an authority to activate them, but so can the president. And so, what makes the RNC type situation so different is that they use dual status commanders who get authority through the president's side and through the governor's side. And then they have a staff that's kind of joint, but then it splits up later down. Also, I like how this chart has a blank person between Northcom and the commander, which is a very strange thing. So that's a little weird. So like this dual status command, it means that they have a very huge set of executive powers, even though in a formal sense these powers were previously divided, because it's been a tradition in America that there shouldn't be political structures of this nature. That's why they were divided. It's a very interesting merger, and it's worth thinking about. This is just the kind of bureaucratic process to activate these teams. After there's an incident, it kind of flow goes down, and then when they can't get enough support from FEMA, then they can call up the Army, sign some forms. They talk to the Secretary of Defense assistant, and then Northcom sends a military unit. That's kind of the process. National response architecture. So they're between the state emergency operations centers, and then on the other side you have the FBI, a joint task force that could exist, private sector NGOs. And there's other people that might be like Health and Human Services, Department of Energy, or Transportation, etc. Everybody's supposed to work together. Again, this also applies more to disasters as well, not just that stuff. So this is probably one of the more important couple slides. Okay, thanks for sticking with me so far. So they will set up first in this office in Chicago, the RRCC, which is in the FEMA office, and to what they call the Joint Operations Area in Ohio for the RNC to coordinate mission assignments from the DoD to support the lead federal agency, which is basically the Secret Service. They establish a forward base and a rear operations. So rear is back in Chicago, and here we go, the FEMA, IOF, NASA, Glenn Research Center, the DCO, forward base, NASA, Glenn Research Center, Cleveland, Ohio. So and obviously they got the Coast Guard. The Secret Service will be running the Multi-Agency Communications Center. The FBI has its little intelligence office. The State Emergency Operations Center, Columbus. Joint Task Force, RNC in North Canton. Ohio National Guard in Columbus. And then this is probably the base support installation for logistics. Wright-Patterson, and another air base that we have on our map. So again, this shows the NASA Center is the central place, and then they basically say if there's something like a huge incident, then they can escalate their powers and so forth. Now, this is pretty good. So what this gave us here, most interestingly, is again NASA Glenn Center, Cleveland, Ohio, FEMA operating out of there, and the DCO military unit operating out of there. So FEMA Region 5 will also be operating in this place down by the airport. The Multi-Agency Communication Center is at the International Exposition Center. That is the primary center for operational coordination and communication. They'll have 3 people in that. The FBI Joint Operations Center downtown, they'll have people at that. They'll have people at the state agency place there. The Joint Task Force there, the National Guard there, and then they also bring up people from the Army North in Texas, or they're ready to go quickly. And then that includes, various people in different capacities. Someone from NORAD, a liaison to NORAD, will be there. I think this is a Army North geographic information system, like augmentation person. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, or the one in Youngstown. Also, this is very interesting. RNC Prep, Eagle Rising FEMA exercise, other briefings, other exercises. We have this all on a timeline, and you can page through to kind of get a sense of what those type of events look like. Found photos to attach to those. RNC Operational TTX, that's a tabletop exercise. Battle Assembly, there's 2 battle assemblies in May and June. That's sort of a conventional kind of like, let's get out there, practice everything. So FEMA 5 also did an internal one, and then there's another one coming up on the 28th of June. There'll be another tabletop exercise. I thought that the timeline here is pretty significant. It shows MACC functional exercise is back on June 7th. There'll probably be a communications exercise at 1 p.m. on July 16th, the day before the RNC starts, and that will be at the NASA base. And again, this is RNC battle rhythm and timeline. I think that indicates the militarization mindset that you get when you involve the military in things to this extent. They start to think of everything as a battle, and when you have a hammer, you start to think of everything and everybody as nails, and that's kind of what's going on here. And the RNC ends, and then they roll up. All hazards planning, it just kind of runs down everything from protests / civil disturbance / riots. So protests are considered a threat, period. And I think that, and they're right on the list with like cyber incidents, and chemicals and a nuclear detonation. Protests are in the same spectrum of malice. It shows that the MACC is kind of the main management center, and then you have a division between this backup area. This is the one back in Chicago, and then you have this area for crisis management FBI, consequence management FEMA. So FEMA, FBI. You have pretty small stuff, but it does talk about the different military elements that can feed into each side. Think of it this way, it's like this is more like riots in the FBI, and then this is more like, I don't know, an earthquake or whatever. Kind of random, but that's how they're sort of looking at everybody. Protests are the same as generic evil guys and that dude burning stuff and a nuke. It's all the same. So consequence management, crisis management, and the FBI really will be in charge, but they'll be kind of pretending they're not, I guess, in some sense. Also, common operating picture to Northcom, that tends to mean that when things are running, I think we can show you later in our documentation that indicates data layers, things that it could include military satellites and things of that nature. And this is just a group photo of them and their info.